Peter Drecker said, "Rank does not confer privilege, nor does it give power, but rather it confers responsibility." Welcome to McBain Moments. Alright, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Make sure you take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, if you want to support my work, consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain and subscribing. Okay. Rank does not confer privilege or give power. This was actually the founding tenet behind feudalism, which is something that a lot of people really don't realize. So the idea behind feudalism is that you have lords and vassals. The lords, who own the land, confer upon their vassals portions of that land for which they can run their livelihood. Vassals would also have vassals who sublease land to their vassals, which eventually developed into the system of serfdom versus freedom versus lordship. Of course, as things develop over time, they mutate, they evolve or devolve into different systems. But in this case, the idea behind it was the higher rank you are, the more power you get, but the more responsibility you have to those beneath you in the power structure. And it was a very primitive but effective form of power balance. It, of course, ended up being very imbalanced, as many things are as hierarchies become pathological. But what happened was the higher rank you were, the more people you were responsible for keeping safe. And that was the entire design behind feudalism. It's the lord has a military responsibility to those underneath him. And the vassals, the tenants, per se, would owe the lord a certain amount of labor or military service to protect those underneath them. And that's where the knight's fee came from. So, where does this all come into play in the modern age? We don't have a system of patronage anymore. Or do we? The old saying is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Patronage is alive and well in the Western world today, and it's even more so in the Eastern world, especially in places like Japan, who still have many anachronisms of feudalism, or many of the artifacts of feudalism are part of everyday life. If you're part of a major family, like, say, the Mitsubishis, then a lot of those old artifacts still exist. And I'm not calling out the Mitsubishi Keiretsu or any of its constituent companies. It's an easy example because they were one of the biggest zaibatsu, which are semi-monopolistic banking corporations that own interests in many different economic sectors that made those corporations very similar to a barony in England. So how do you see that in modern life? Well, believe it or not, in the United States today, feudalism is still legal. You can make a voluntary contract with anyone where they will trade a certain amount of service to you for something in kind. The most easily recognizable artifact of that is landlords and rent. When you rent an apartment, you are paying a tenant's fee or a knight's fee to your landlord to live there, and then they in turn have to protect you from the damage of the outside world. They put a roof over your head, they're responsible for keeping it up in shape. And so this is the most modern form of that, but it can be done in other ways as well. In the SCA, we have feudal relationships where a dependent has a signed contract with a lord or lady, a peer, that has a responsibility to teach the dependent, but the dependent has the responsibility to serve the peer. And so, like when the peer needs things carried for them, or when they need help putting their armor on, things like that, the squire will help the knight. And then the knight teaches in turn the squire and advocates for them at court. And so this is modern feudalism. And this happens in business life as well. Because, for instance, if you work for, let's say if you work for any business and you're looking to become a supervisor or a manager, oftentimes you're taken under the wing of a higher level manager. That manager will teach you, and in turn you make sure that their objectives are taken care of first, because that's how you develop the relationship. Whether this is correct or not is something that you can argue out, but it is something that does exist. So how do you utilize this in your everyday life? What is the purpose of this whole conversation? The the higher level you get, whether it's in your job or in your hobby or in your whatever, the more responsibility you're going to take on. Yeah, you gain rank, you gain notoriety, you gain fame, right? You become the influencer, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's not the power or the privilege that's important here, because it does come with some. With great power comes great responsibility, but on the same token, the more responsibility you take on, the greater the power and privilege you will have earned. And therefore you'll see that. And that's why the more success you gain, the more rich you will become, the more money you will accumulate, because that's also why as you get promoted you earn more money, because you are taking on larger responsibilities, and therefore with it comes that greater privilege. And so what you want to do is, what responsibilities can you take on? How can you teach those who are further down the totem pole, who have not climbed the hierarchy, to bring them up to your level? That should always be your goal. Everyone that's beneath you in the hierarchy, it should not be, I need to cut myself down to make everything equal. It's, how do I raise the people that are lower up? And so that is often the hardest thing for us to understand, because it's easy for everyone to lower down to the lowest common denominator. It's harder to help the people that are currently at the lowest common denominator raise that common denominator. And so the goal should be, okay, if I'm at level A and there is someone at level B, how do I get that person to level A? And that is perhaps the most important thing of all for us to do. And so as you progress in whatever it is you look to progress in, find the people that are at level B and try to figure out how to help them get to level A. That is the meaning behind rank conferring responsibility. Yet privilege and power are going to come with that. That's just a fact of life. The higher up the Pareto distribution you get, the more power you have, the more money you have, whatever. The importance is that you take the responsibility that is inherent in that and help those that want to climb that Pareto distribution climb it. Go and do likewise. This has been a McBain moment.